Hey everybody, Greg Pruett here, President of the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. Today is February 23rd, 2023. Again, for those that don't know me, I am the President of the ISAA, and we are coming to you today with a very important alert. So, I was on my way home and got an alert from a legislator who was concerned about some wording in a bill that had to do with trespassing. Now, typically, when we're reviewing legislation, and there are hundreds and hundreds of bills every single year, we don't dig into each and every one of them looking for gun control. And typically, gun control is almost never proposed in Idaho because it doesn't go anywhere. And the wording of this bill, you're going to find out, has no mention of the word guns, has no mention of the word firearms. Um, but it's probably an issue where we're going to have to constantly watch to make sure that it doesn't impact gun owners, because there are bills that can implement gun control without actually mentioning the word firearm. And that's essentially what this does. And I'm not even saying that the person who introduced the legislation had this intent, but if she didn't, it's an unintended consequence of what is in the bill. So this bill, and this was about an hour before House Bill 167 hit the Judiciary and Rules Committee, and we were trying to figure out what in the world was going on, and so we had very little time to try and stop this thing in committee. And so for those that are looking, if you go to the 2022, or excuse me, 2023 legislative session, and you look at bills and you look up House Bill 167, it's going to it's relating to critical infrastructure trespass. And again, your initial thought might be, well, why does that even matter? That doesn't really sound like it has anything to do with us, okay? But we're going to explain why this is a really, really big deal. Okay, so I'm going to go through the bill, not necessarily word by word, but I'm going to explain the parts that are really important, okay? So, critical infrastructure trespass. A person is guilty of critical infrastructure trespass if the person knowingly and willfully enters or remains in a critical infrastructure facility or a construction site of a critical infrastructure facility without permission of the owner or the property, or after notice is given, that's important there, or after notice is given to depart or not to trespass. Okay? For purposes of this section, notice is given by personal communication to the person by the owner or occupant, or his agent, or by a peace officer. Posting of signs reasonably likely to come to the attention of intruders, okay, or the presence of fencing or other physical barrier designed to exclude intruders. So, first, let's talk about what critical infrastructure is, because you might not understand what that means, and quite frankly, I'm not really sure I do either. So, according to the bill, critical infrastructure means, and then they have a list of facilities, and I believe this is included to, but not limited. Okay, so it means it's going to include all of these things that I'm going to read off to you, but it's not limited to these places. Okay, chemical manufacturing, storage, use, and transportation. Commercial facilities with open public access where the general public can move freely without the deterrent of highly visible security barriers. All right, that sounds like a lot of places, in my opinion. Communications, critical manufacturing, dams, defense industrial bases. See, that's something you might typically think of as critical infrastructure, would be like Gowan Field or something like that. Emergency services, energy, financial services, i.e., banks, food and agriculture. So I assume farming, manufacturing type stuff like a meat factory, but it just says food. It says food. So grocery stores, I assume, would fall under that. Your restaurants, I assume, would fall under that. I mean, food is critical to life, right? So perhaps it's meant to be under there. Government facilities, healthcare and public health. So anything related to healthcare would also be covered under this. Information technology, mineral exploration, nuclear reactors. So what they did was they threw in some nice defense and nuclear and stuff that's really already heavily protected under federal law and state law for that matter. And then they threw in these other food and healthcare and some other things that we want to talk about. See, the person who introduced the bill, Brett Raybould, she's from Rexburg, she tried to claim it was about something else. And I don't even remember what she claimed that the bill was about. But as soon as I read the bill, I immediately thought this bill is about Ammon Bundy. Like, undoubtedly, this bill is about Ammon Bundy and the people's rights groups and trying to stop them from protesting outside of places like St. Luke's and stuff. That's immediately what came to mind. I thought that's what they're really trying to do here. It has nothing to do with whatever she initially said it was intended for. Um, okay, so under Idaho law, the way the current law reads, if they are going to trespass you from property, they have to give you a verbal warning. So even if there's a no gun sign, that does not have the force of law in Idaho. Okay, you walk into a restaurant that has a no gun sign, and the owner sees that you're printing, or maybe you were open carrying, or whatever. They ask you to leave. You have to leave. Not you're trespassing. Okay. The way that this is written, that goes away. Now they post a sign, and you walk inside that facility. Now they can just call the cops, and you can be arrested for trespassing. And she tried to claim during the committee hearing that that wasn't the case. That they still have to give a verbal warning. But, and this is crucial, there are 3 things listed here as notice, as how notice is given. One, subsection A, is the personal communication from the owner, right, or a cop, that you gotta leave. B is the sign, and C is the presence of fencing or other physical barrier. What well, I don't know what physical barrier means. Is the curb to the street a physical barrier? I have no idea. And some legislators that voted against this brought up a lot of this stuff, including the Democrats, that were like, this is overly broad, this is really vague, there's way too much interpretation here. But the key is, and we checked with people who write legislation for a living, essentially, and do this kind of work. We said, so at the end of personal communication, there's a semicolon. And then after the posting of signs, there's a semicolon, and then the word or, and then there's the third one. And so I said, does the semicolon mean and, or what does it mean? And they said, no, whatever word comes at the end of the list, that's what it means. Okay? So it means personal communication or the posting of a sign or the presence of fencing or barriers. And one of the legislators, Representative Julianne Young from Idaho Falls, Blackfoot, she pointed that out. She's like, wait a minute here, it says or. Like, so literally, if they post a sign and they decide that you've come onto the property and violated their sign, now you're trespassing. They can just call the cops straight away. They don't even have to give you a verbal warning anymore. Now, this is a big deal. This is a constitutional carry state. Hundreds of thousands of gun owners carry in this state. And places like Boise and Sandpoint and Haley and probably Coeur d'Alene, okay, there are probably Pocatello, there's cities all over the state where food establishments have no firearms allowed signs. And gun owners carry in those places all the time without any issues. And, if they're asked to leave, they have to leave. However, the way that this is written would immediately put you in danger of being arrested criminally without warning other than that sign. And that's in hopes that you read the sign. Now, there are states like Oklahoma and a bunch of others that have these types of laws where signs have the force of law. And usually what happens is somebody's going to get arrested under this bill. I promise you, somebody's going to get arrested under this trespassing bill. And it's going to be a gun owner. And then they're going to go and say, well, they didn't have a sign. And the store's going to say, well, we had a sign. It was down in the bottom left corner and it was kind of small. And so what the legislature will then come back and do is say, well, now the sign's got to be 18 inches by 24 inches and the letters have to be yay high and it has to cite this code. And it just turns into a giant mess. And then we end up with the full force of law behind these signs. But undoubtedly, we have no doubt that that is exactly what this will do. Because she used the word or. If she had used the word and, you could argue that it would be the same as what the law is now. They've got to give you verbal warning, and they had a sign, and you didn't leave, and then you're trespassing. That would essentially be what the law is now. So in theory, they could fix that one pretty easily. And I'm not saying I support the law personally as is, but from a gun perspective, that part is a huge, huge concern with lots of really bad, damaging impact to gun owners, potentially. The other part is, it says, an individual or organization that aids, abets, solicits, compensates, hires, conspires with, commands, or procures a person to commit the crime of critical infrastructure trespass is subject to a fine not to exceed $100,000, provided that the individual or organization acted with the intent that the crime of critical infrastructure trespass be completed. Now, okay, so this is a big deal because there's only a handful of organizations in this state. Now, this could obviously encompass nationwide organizations, but there's only a handful of groups in this state that ever protest or rally and do that kind of stuff. Okay, we are one of them. We hold rallies all the time. We have protested before. They're talking about intent, and intent is hard to prove. Okay, I'll give them that. Intent is very difficult to prove at times. But what happens if I say there's this anti-gun establishment that is pushing gun control at the Idaho Capitol? We need to go protest this anti-gun this food establishment. Let's say it's a restaurant, okay? And so I send out an email and I'm like, hey, go protest. Now I didn't say don't block the entryway to the restaurant because that wasn't my intent, but I didn't put that in there not to do that. Okay, and I show up and I was expecting like 100 people to show up to this protest, and instead 6,000 show up. And we've ended up spilling out into the streets. We've ended up blocking their parking lot, all on accident, not because I intended it that way, but we were going to protest, right? And my intention was to stay on the sidewalk, but there was just too many people. And gun owners were just running all over the place, and I couldn't really control it. Now you're telling me I'm on the hook for $100,000, which is, by the way, a large chunk of our budget, and we don't have a billionaire backing us or anything like that. Now I'm on the hook for all that? Yeah, I don't think so. So that whole thing, and this is where Representative Gannon, one of the Democrats, and I guess I would thank him for he was pointing that out. He was very concerned about protests and it spilling over into one area and who's responsible and where's the intent. And what happens if this is in a place like Blaine County with an anti-gun prosecutor who's like, you know what? We think they did this, and they probably got a judge, I assume, in Blaine County, who's probably also not friendly to the Second Amendment. What's to stop them from just prosecuting us anyway and making us spend tens of thousands of dollars fighting off this because they now have somewhere in statute they can just go after us? This is really dangerous stuff. I mean, not only to the Second Amendment, but also to the First Amendment. We have never instructed our members to go and violate the law. Okay, as gun owners, we know we're always a target. We're always a target. And something like this leaves the door wide open for a target. You know, Representative Young also pointed out, what the heck is a barrier? There's no definition in here of what a barrier constitutes. If I put up like 3 traffic cones across my parking lot, is that a barrier now? Does it have to be a fence? And in fact, the Democrat, Representative Gannon, was like, well, why don't we just put up fences? If this is all critical infrastructure, why doesn't everybody have a 6-foot fence that's unscalable or something along those lines? So pointed out some really good stuff. So it passed 9-8. Okay, it was almost killed in committee. It should have been killed in committee. There were some people that voted for it, and we're still trying to get the full list of names of who voted for and against it, and we'll get that to you guys as soon as we can. But looking through this, you know, the fix to that first problem is relatively easy. The second one, I don't know how you even fix that other than just stripping it out completely, because I get it. Look, if I sent out a thing and I said, you know, surround this facility, don't let anybody in, and break all the windows and damage. I mean, but there's already laws against doing stuff like that. And I think Representative Colin Nash, who's a Democrat, he pointed out the same thing. He was like, I haven't seen anything in here that really does anything different than our current trespass laws in terms of holding accountable people who are deliberately and intentionally trying to harm another business. So we oppose this 100%. It's HB 167. Here shortly, we will have a link in the description for you guys to contact your legislators. If you know how to do that on your own, great. If not, sometime either tonight or tomorrow morning, there will be a link on our website that we'll post in the description that you guys can use to contact your legislators. And we only have a few days. Okay, this bill could be on the House floor within, what's today, Thursday? So maybe Monday or Tuesday, it could be on the House floor already. So we have very little time to start talking to our legislators saying, stop, you know, this has got to be redone or completely obliterated, because the way it's written now, a lot of gun owners are going to be put in jeopardy. So thank you guys for tuning in. Please be sure to share this video. Share it in groups, pages, wherever you can. Share it, email it, text it, whatever you got to do to get as many gun owners as possible talking to their legislators about this. Thank you. Take care. God bless.